another person. Even the women that are cooking are employing other women to wash up for them, to serve the children. So when you look at that ripple effect, where we've got, we're buying utensils, for instance. Every woman that cooks has to buy utensils and cooking pots and all of that. So there's a value chain there that ensures that people, creates that opportunity for people who actually make those items. So it's a huge effort, and Nigeria is a huge country. It's a diverse country.
I get your point on the trickle-down effect.
Yes.
But then there are questions as to whether or not government itself will be able to sustain such a program. And yes, by that I mean that, government constantly has to earmark money for it.
Oh, yes.
It's not a program that is going to be generating funds by itself. It's a social investment program.
Well, it's a social investment program, but like for the N-Power, it's not meant for government to absorb them. Right? It's meant for them to learn along the value chain in the period of 2 years where it is they have the interest and the ability to take up and set up their own businesses. So it's like a social inclusion thing, it's an economic inclusion thing, it's trying to get them to understand how best to set up their businesses.
How are you monitoring, sorry to interrupt you there, but how are you monitoring the school feeding program?
Yeah.
There was this video, I don't know if you saw it, that went around of, someone slicing bread in 4 and giving students stew on the bread.
Yes.
It's a very pitiable video.
Oh, yes. We actually investigated and we found out that it was a fake video. We were able to determine from the uniform which state, because a lot of the women have uniforms. And we buy bread directly from a bread seller who because they have companies that we pay directly to, and we buy not in loaves, we buy in rolls. So there was no way that could have been what was happening in that state. But it was somebody obviously that was actually not on the program, or she was on the program but she was being used. It was curious for me if that person really meant for us to address the issues, why there was no face or no mention of which school. What we did immediately after that was to ensure that we launched a Track With Us campaign. And even yesterday we had a long meeting in our office trying to see how we can get the different, the public to just walk in. We've shared numbers, just walk into any school that we're having these problems. Because you see, it is a huge task trying from the federal to ensure that states comply, right? So yes, it's not like there aren't any challenges. There are bound to be challenges. There are all kinds of issues that arise, even from the level of literacy that a lot of the women that we employ now or that we pay have. A lot of them don't have the self-esteem, for instance, so they are easily bullied. When they collect their money, the money goes directly to them. They are bullied into giving up the money or giving up part of the money. Some of them, every state has a menu that we sat down and costed with the state based on what is available contextually.
So what state was that? What state was that?
It was Oyo. It was Oyo State.
The video was made in Oyo State?
Yes, it was.
You've been able to investigate?
Yes, we have.
It was a fake video?
Yes,
so there was no situation, not even a one-off, not even a situation where maybe they ran out of money, or it was a situation where they were expecting funds and they just had to feed the students something for that day?
Every menu of ours has protein in it, has a protein element. So even if, that school was giving bread and stew, they ought to have been meat or fish or tofu, soya, because that is what is happening in some states. Now, I'm not saying that in some states and in some schools, some of these issues are not happening. Some of these challenges are erupting. This is why we're asking everybody to call us, to just walk into the state and report. And we're taking cooks off.
I'm going to ask you to please hold your thoughts, and we'll expatiate a bit more on this issue when we return from this break. Please stay with us. Well, it's our closing moment with the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Social Investment Program, Mrs. Miriam Uwais. I know that you appreciated, you were explaining what could have happened and how you're expecting Nigerians to help track and monitor the project in the schools. But for the millions of Nigerians who are out there, who are unemployed, and we're looking to government's promise that, they were going to be able to absorb or create 2 million jobs at the least a year. And they have not been counted amongst, first of all, 2 million jobs are yet to be created, directly at least. And they've not been counted amongst those who have been employed so far. And they're looking to government for employment. What would you be saying to them?
Well, I'd like to first clarify that government didn't make promises to absorb 2 million people. Government made promises to create jobs. So that's getting people to take ownership of their lives is also creating jobs. So that was the promise, investing in the people, getting them to understand how they can set up their own businesses against what the expectation is, creating the atmosphere, so the ease of doing business. There's so many things that are being done to encourage people to set up their businesses, the MSMEs. They're over 300,000 now that have been the clinics that are happening all over the country. I would say that we as Nigerians should actually look at what our own talents are, what our own strengths are, and try and set up our own businesses or try and support others who can who are setting up their own businesses. It isn't all about government. Government is about creating the opportunities and making it easier for people to have their businesses. So it's also about the energy, the infrastructure, which this government is trying to do. We're not even talking about the agricultural sector. So many people, hundreds and thousands of people have been able to set up their businesses in the agricultural sector. We have, huge numbers under the Anchor Borrowers program, the CBN program. So looking at just the empire is like looking at just a subset of what government is doing. Government's efforts have been on so many platforms. So I would suggest that we need to begin to re-examine and rethink the way we expect government to provide a job. Government can't provide all the jobs. Government can only give you the atmosphere that will enable you set up.
Is the private sector happy?
I believe so. I believe so. A lot of what we've done with Enagro, for instance, is the private sector is really happy because we sat down with the private sector, the Ministry of Agriculture sat down with the private sector and drew up the modules of what the private sector wants to see happening out with the farmers so that they can grow, they can have their products. So the private sector is working with us to see that what we enable is something that they can also support.
Well, we'll definitely be getting feedback from the private sector in the coming days, but we have to thank you most kindly for coming on Sunrise Daily. Mrs. Miriam Uwais is the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Social Investment Programs. Well, Sunrise Daily continues about now with Chamberlain in Lagos.